Oscar Piastri is under more pressure than any other driver on the Formula One grid right now, and here's why. Oscar Piastri, I'm sure you've heard of him by now, one of motorsport's hottest prospects, an incredibly sought after man, and until very recently, an Alpine junior driver. 2022 saw the Australian hit the headlines and become one of the most talked about names on the Formula One grid, without even being on it. But with fame comes attention, and with attention in Formula One comes pressure to perform. I don't think there's ever been more pressure on a rookie as there will be on Piastri in this 2023 season. As many young drivers do, Oscar set his sights on Formula One, what many, including myself, see as the pinnacle of motorsport. The Aussie did everything in his power to earn himself a seat at the top table. He won the Formula Renault Cup in 2019, and because of his scintillating performances, also landed a spot in the Renault Sport Academy in January 2020. This only spurred him on and gave him the platform to then go on and win the Formula 3 Championship in 2020 as well, before also then winning the Formula 2 Championship in 2021. With back-to-back-to-back championships in progressively more difficult series, only one goal was left, and that was to achieve a spot in Formula 1. You would assume that after winning literally everything in his sights, first time of asking, Oscar would be straight into a Formula 1 seat. Well, unfortunately for him, as part of the Renault driver system, the only team that had connections was Alpine. This is unfortunately for the Australian, the only Renault-powered team in Formula 1, which gives Piastri a difficult problem to solve. How do you get into a Formula 1 seat when the Alpine team already had themselves a very impressive driver pairing in Esteban Ocon and Fernando Alonso? At the start of the 2022 season, Alpine seemed to have themselves a perfect pair. Alonso brought experience and exceptional pace, whilst Ocon brought reliability and longevity with the team. The duo also worked remarkably well together in 2021, picked up a win in Hungary. There was no room for an up-and-coming starlet within the team dynamic, leaving Piastri as the team's test driver for the 2022 season. Although you have to hand it to Oscar, he adapted to the situation of having to be a test driver for at least a year really well, making sure that he was getting himself a good amount of Formula 1 experience, testing at every opportunity with Alpine, and offering himself up for further testing opportunities at other teams such as McLaren. But nothing compares to the real thing, and I think he knew he was good enough for a Formula 1 grid slot, so he took it into his own hands. He wouldn't just hang around and hope that Alpine would eventually make space for him. I think at the time, Fernando Alonso was contracted up until the end of 2023, whilst Esteban Ocon had an even longer deal with the French team, being contracted up until the end of 2024. It would have been a very long wait for the Formula 2 champion. That was until two seats came up for him all at once. The Alpine team was stunned partway through the 2022 season, with Alonso out of nowhere moving to Aston Martin. The Alpine team only found out once the official announcement from the team in green had already been made. Alonso clearly not worried about cutting ties with the team that had put him back on the Formula 1 grid, but that's besides the point, as luckily Alpine had the perfect reserve in Oscar. They announced Piastri as taking the Spaniard's Alpine seat for the 2023 season, only for him to turn it down. But another thing Alpine were unaware of was that Piastri, whilst providing his services for testing purposes at McLaren, had also negotiated himself a seat in Papaya, replacing the underwhelming Daniel Ricciardo for the 2023 season. Piastri finally got what he'd been working so hard to achieve, but the circumstances in which he managed to achieve his dream, probably not what he expected. I mean, it's not often that you see a Formula 1 seat turned down, let alone after an official announcement, and even more stunningly by a rookie. Oscar solved the first problem of getting himself a seat in Formula 1, only to now have a lot more problems ahead of him. He comes into his first season in Formula 1, not only with the expectation of being a junior series champion, which doesn't always translate into instant success, whilst being in direct rivalry with the team that he embarrassed during the summer. Let's face it, the summer break fiasco for Alpine was serious drama. False announcements, court cases, Twitter turmoil. We loved it. The soap opera of Formula 1 was in full flow, but the McLarens and the Alpines were battling for fourth in the Constructors last year, and I can see them battling for fifth this season, which means this is going to get tasty. There's going to be absolutely no love lost between Oscar and the Alpines as they go wheel to wheel, and knowing Formula 1, it's going to be the first thing that the media jump on if there is any sort of incident. If Oscar finishes ahead of the Alpines this season, he'll be a genius, but if he finishes behind them, his choices will be scrutinised. Although having said that, as much as the drama will be there and the expectation of the name that he's made for himself, he's in the McLaren car now. He has the 2023 seat, so before he can even worry about the standings, he has to focus on finding a place within this McLaren team and starting to get used to the car, which is not an easy task to tackle either. Daniel Ricciardo has come into that team team, as one of the drivers of the last generation, multiple race wins under his belt, and even after 2 full seasons, 44 Grand Prix, he still can't get to grips with that McLaren setup. The cost of taking a competitive Formula 1 seat is that you have to perform at the highest level almost as soon as you're put into the car. Luckily, the first few races of the season, it's been McLaren that have faltered, giving him a little bit of breathing room, but he needs to adapt to a car that everyone who has driven it before has said is awful and deliver in what looks to be an incredibly competitive midfield as a rookie. Is he expected to beat Lando? No. Absolutely not. Lando Norris has been one of the top 5 drivers on the grid for me over the last couple of seasons. I've gone on and on about how McLaren need to deliver the young British driver a better car sooner rather than later, or his head will definitely be turned, but that also plays against Oscar Piastri in my opinion, as the car will be developed in favour of Norris at every point throughout the season, which could make it even trickier for Piastri to actually find his feet with the car's style, especially if it moves away from where he might be happiest. The interest I have in Oscar Piastri's rookie season as a McLaren fan, but also a Formula 1 fan, is sky high. The mixture of drama, expectation and pressure is such an intriguing proposition, and there are so many questions yet to be answered. Is he going to be as good as back-to-back-to-back championships have made him look after a year in a testing role? Did he make the right choice in going to McLaren over Alpine? Will he actually be able to unlock the pace of that McLaren car, even though incredibly experienced drivers like Daniel Ricciardo couldn't? So for me, Piastri definitely has some reasons to be worried coming into this 2023 season, but you know what they say about pressure? It makes diamonds. I'd love to know what you guys think in the comments down below. Will Piastri perform at McLaren in 2023, or am I overhyping him in my head? Whilst you're down there, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I'll see you next time.